So thanks for joining me at Back Bay Mission from the Executive Director's Desk, and I'm here with Paul, who is a pastor in Minnesota.
You bet.
The great state of Minnesota. I should say it like a Minnesota, right? And he's here to share with us a little bit. He brought a group of youth down with his youth director. Your associate pastor is also
right.
with you?
Yep.
Yeah. And a few adults, but mostly young high school kids, which is really amazing. So I want to just kind of ask Paul some questions and get his input on life and ministry up in Minnesota, and then what his impressions were here at Back Bay. And you've been to Back Bay one other time, right?
I've been here this is my 9th trip.
Oh, 9th trip. When were you here last time?
Just before COVID.
Right.
So I think it was 17 or 18.
And we had met a couple of times, right?
In Minneapolis
In
area.
Minneapolis. We had some conversations too, correct?
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, I remember that. So thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing this incredible group of young people. They painted our hallways. They painted our administration building, which is in some desperate need of a freshen up. So
You bet.
we appreciated that, which means that the money we would end up painting, right, is money that we can put into the services that we provide people. So we really appreciate that. So Paul, tell us a little bit about your church and your context up there in Minneapolis.
Sure.
Or I mean in
Rochester.
In Rochester.
Yeah, there you go.
Which is where Mayo Clinic is at, the famous Mayo Clinic.
That's right. Yeah, we're housed with Mayo Clinic in our backyard, basically, and it's Mayo Clinic itself employs about 40,000 people, so it's just such a presence in our community. We love that. We kind of build all we do in that town around that formula with Mayo
Right.
Clinic. So it's a lot of guests coming in, and that makes our church a vital part of our community. We've been in Rochester for about 120 years now, and very.
Didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's a long historic church, and we just we moved once from our original location, but over those years, incredible ministry has really taken place. A couple of notable things. One, early 100 years ago, our church, back then the Brotherhood, the Men's Brotherhood, started with what is now Samaritan Bethany Home, which is part of Chisholm. It's part of our network of Health and Human Service agencies in the United Church of Christ. And they started that home, which is still in existence today, and we are still make up half the board, and it's just that outreach.
Oh, that's beautiful. Are you on the board then too?
They don't allow pastors to be on the board, so it's us linked now with 6 other Lutheran churches. But they don't want us pastors to play. We support in other ways. We have
So it was the UCC church there and other Lutheran churches that formed?
So Samaritan Home was actually our church for our service, and then the Lutherans have Bethany Home, and then they merged together about 40 years ago. But they're under Chisholm. They do our health insurance program, and we are vitally involved with that. They're 6 blocks from our church.
So, wow, that's fantastic.
Very
and what is their? How many people do they have there?
At the nursing home, about 230, I think, is the last count. Yeah, so very, very vital.
Wow. Because when I was living in Phoenix, I was familiar with Beatitudes, which is also part of Chisholm, and very large and multi-leveled. So that's a great ministry and great outreach. So what keeps your community vital, and how long have you been there?
Yeah, so I've been there 22 years, and it's been really exciting. When I came there, this church is really an established church, and very well known throughout the community. But when I got there, I really wanted to find a way to make a difference for the people of Rochester. It's a very comfortable town, and not a lot of things going on theologically, if you will, or church-wise, but everybody's just okay with church. But we really found a need really quick to be a voice for justice and inclusion in our community. And as soon as I got there, I realized that need was huge, and no church was taking up the mantle to do that. In fact, I was there 1 month, and this is right after the Iraqi War. And so I helped organize a community march about that, and just stay in solidarity for peace. And so from then on, it's been kind of a journey of peace and justice work. Over the years, almost 14 years ago now, we became an open and affirming congregation in a relatively conservative community.
Right.
And have a quiet community. And through that, we have really been a light on the hill for many. And we continue to do ministries of justice and peace, and really working strongly with anti-racism work, and then in the LGBTQ plus community very, very strongly, where we host events. I don't know if you're there, we did the Vote No campaign. Or were you there for that? And so we were instrumental in making sure that that legislation went through, that gay marriage can take place. Very integral part of that, and we continue to be that voice, really known as the light on the hill for many in our community, of the go-to place on any issues of justice, whether it be poverty or hunger, or working with LGBTQ. And our most recent is our anti-racism work, which we're really steeped in, and that's where Pastor Jerry really has an integral part in that outreach ministry.
That's beautiful. That sounds a lot like the church I ended up going to from Minneapolis to Phoenix. Is we became kind of that center for equity and justice.
You bet.
And held a march for peace and unity.
Right.
When an ex-president was there at our convention center.
There you go.
We marched down there and had a candlelight vigil and an action for peace, right, and unity. So my curious thing, especially for people that may be watching this, they're people that are United Church of Christ and people that are not.
Right.
Why do you feel that issue of equity and justice, or justice in particular, was so important for you when you entered ministry there 22 years ago?
Yeah. Well, I was steeped in that. I'm a preacher's kid, and my wife's father was a pastor in the UCC, both of them. And I was raised with that. My dad pastored a church in Iowa, small town but large church, and through the Vietnam War, and really just could constantly preach the message of peace and love and acceptance through that. And so that I was really rooted in that growing up. And then when I went into ministry, that's always been part of who I am. And so going to Peace just really provided a very strong platform for that to happen. And for me personally, to me that is the gospel. And we have to continue to live what Jesus taught and did, not what the church made him to say. And so I really just embodied that and live what Jesus did and calls us to do.
I like what you said about not what we made Jesus say,
That's
right? Because we've kind of turned Jesus into this European savior, right? With European roots and European opinions and ideals, and we've forgotten his Middle Eastern,
yes, indeed,
and Eastern thought.
Yep.
So that's really curious. I find, especially when you saw that as a vision when you went there. Were you clear with the congregation when you went there?
Totally.
And they were ready.
They were ready. They, well, every church I served two other churches previous. That one in St. Louis, and where Eden Seminary as I kind of came back home. And my first church was actually a small rural church in Indiana, in Linton, Indiana, where those folks, small town of 5,000, buckle of the Bible Belt, but they allowed this message to be preached, and we created all sorts of ministries in this little town that really brought, like never before, help there. There we focus on a lot of poverty, because coal miners that have been deunionized, and so they're making great salaries, and then they came down to minimum wage jobs, working these horrible underground dangerous jobs. And then a lot of alcohol abuse going on, and physical abuse in homes. And so we really did a lot of outreach and care, and then deeply involved with Habitat for Humanity that created the chapters there, and defined us. We really stepped into that whole venue. But I've been preaching that. Going to Eden Seminary, you are really steeped in that whole justice working mentality.
And I really completely agree. That is the gospel.
Yep.
And I think what's interesting is last night we had Reverend Bishop Black, who's from Faith Tabernacle, I think it was. I can't remember, but he's become a friend of mine. He was a part of the wait-in to desegregate the beaches when he was a 17, 18-year-old black man, sat at lunch counters to protest, the bigotry that was there. And he also said that he really believes preachers need to be about equity and justice. Churches need to be
Yes.
about justice, which is interesting, right? Because you wouldn't expect somebody from a Pentecostal background
That's correct. Yeah.
to do that. But I think because of his experience of being an activist as a teenager, working with the NAACP, really made a difference. And I found that interesting, the way
Yes.
you two were able to connect on that.
Indeed.
Do
Totally.
you have any comments about that?
Yeah,
About-
yeah. Well, Bishop Black himself is just amazing, and our processing after with our teens was really amazing. So thank you for
Yeah.
kind of coordinating that. But that's why I asked that question: what's the role of the church? And I totally agree that pastors have become so passive about justice and almost fearful to preach
Yeah.
about it. Like when Pastor Jerry came, I said, you know, there are no barriers here. If you don't preach it, you're going to hear about it. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what we embody. So that message, we have to be bold about what justice is. And the other thing that Pastor Black said last night is not to make it about justice, but don't make it political. Because I think that's, anytime we talk about justice, it automatically becomes this political beast out
Yeah.
there. And it's not a blue or a red issue. Justice is a gospel issue.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what we as a pastor need to keep in front of people.
Yeah.
It's not Democrat, Republican. It
Yeah.
is about the love of God, period.
That's really powerful because that's true. And it was. I just came from a meeting today too, where we were talking about inclusive economies here in the Mississippi Gulf
Yep.
Coast, and they came down from Ole Miss, the university up in Oxford, Mississippi, to kind of facilitate this. There were maybe 25, 30 of us there, and that came up too. It came up that because the majority of the people in the room, because we're a not-for-profit service and run not-for-profits, most of us are probably Democrats.
Right.
But we talked about how we need to have conversation, we need to relate, we need to explain, we need to cross those party lines
Right.
to have communication because we're all human, and we all want to move toward equity and justice,
That's right.
right? And so I think that's a beautiful thing because that's what we need in this country because we're so
You bet.
polarized.
You bet.
One of the most beautiful experiences I think I've had since I've been here was last night when Ella
Yep.
asked the Reverend Bishop, right, the Reverend Bishop Black, who was a part of the wade-in, and said that during the wade-in there were white thugs that were there and beat the black waders, right, who were trying to desegregate the beach, and there were children involved, and he was a teenager at the time, and Ella asked this beautiful question: why did they beat the children? Why did they hit the children? And Bishop Black said, that's a really good question, a powerful question, just pointed to his skin.
That's right.
It says because they were black and they were different.
Yep.
And it made me cry, it made
Yes.
me tear up, and
Yep.
and I was like, wow, and you could see for Ella kind of the lights going in, and
Yep.
really for all of us,
That's
because
right.
those are the kind of questions that sometimes we fail to ask, sometimes we
That's
don't
right.
think to ask. But it was probably one of my most beautiful moments here, because I really do believe in this work of equity and justice and dismantling racism. And as we're trying to currently kind of writing out black history or queer history or Jewish history out of our history books and out of our schools and out of our universities, for Bishop Black, who was a part of that, to share his story, keeps the story alive.
Totally.
It makes the stories really real.
Yeah, and that was our conversation around our groups last night too. It was Ella's simple, innocent question from a 13-year-old. Why would that even happen? And I think that's why we need to keep telling the story, is because as the next generations come up, if it's not being shared, it'll become forgotten or ignored or called a hoax.
Or we'll relive that history.
It will circle back.
Circle
Absolutely.
back, because
Yeah.
we don't know our history, we don't understand our history, we don't know
Yep.
the stories.
Yeah.
Because I think storytelling is one of the most
It's
powerful
huge. Yeah.
gifts.
It's huge.
It's kind of what you and I do as pastors.
Yep.
I mean, we storytell, right?
Indeed.
We're sharing the old stories, and we're trying to give those stories maybe a fresh new look for
Right.
our community and our people today around equity and justice and around what it means to be loving your neighbor.
Yep.
And so that's really critical. Any final thoughts about what the experience has been for you here? Because
yeah.
I know you've been managing those young people.
Oh yeah, it's exhausting, but it is great. We talked about that today. We do all these great mission trips, and it comes to a point they come with their worldly stuff with them, and these shells of trying to be cool or whatever that is. And I always say, I told the leaders first time, most of them have been on a trip like this, and I said, wait till day 3, because that's when it breaks down, and they're tired, and and it comes off, and they become genuinely themselves. And that has just been so beautiful to watch it. And Bishop Black was part of that. If I can kind of peeling back about this whole reason why we're here and the significance of what Back Bay Mission has done for all these years was kind of laid out before him.
Yeah.
And it's just like this unpeeling of that onion. And it was just really cool to watch that happen and watch those relationships develop. And then as they process these difficult issues, these young people have brilliant insight, and it's kind of an innocent perspective, but they're not going to let it happen again. And I'm just like, sorry, I get a little bit emotional about that, but they truly embody what the message is. And so here, and I've talked about the power of this mission, and as I told you yesterday, this is the church, and this is what the church needs to be about. It is what a powerful symbol of the gospel work in action. And I just really love this place and love the work and the staff and their commitment to love, and for the people who are served here, what a beautiful testament of faith. And so I thank you all for that. It is such an incredibly God-giving place to so many people.
Well, thank you. But when y'all come down here from various places like Minnesota, and it enlivens us. And for me especially, because being an ordained UCC pastor, I kind of miss having UCC peeps around, because we share a common understanding of gospel, a common understanding of equity and justice and dismantling racism and all the good stuff we're a part of. And around one of the signs I have there, that even though it's Christmas, is the refugee, right? Remembering that Jesus was a refugee.
That's right. That's right.
And how do we speak truth to our culture today that would also want to mitigate migrants and refugees, right?
That's right.
And so it was a profound moment this morning, because as I was walking Jerry over to the Micah Day Center, I asked about the 2 black youth that you had.
Right.
I said, are they okay? Was that conversation last night uncomfortable for them, or did they feel they were being singled out, right?
Right.
And he explained to me that both of those black young people that were here were adopted by white families.
Right.
And again, that was another level of, oh my goodness, And then I think what was expressed last night, and what's been expressed in some of our morning meetings even, has been, so what's race like in Mississippi?
Right.
Because people have this really kind of mired view of what Mississippi is like.
Right. Right.
And that it is the cradle of the civil rights movement, us, Alabama, right? The Deep South. But they haven't been on the journey. And I think Reverend Black last night said some really powerful things about, what he did some work of what are the worst places for black folk to live in the country, and it's kind of Midwestern,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
And then he said, I wouldn't want to live anywhere but Mississippi, because for me as a black man, this is a great place to live. And I hope some of that dispelling the myths and bringing us a unity and realizing, and what he said though is that, which identifies the fact that racism is alive and well everywhere.
Correct.
And it moved from Mississippi up to the north, right? And it moves from the north down to Mississippi, and it's really alive and well in our culture right now. And it's people like you, young people like your young people that came, that hear the message, that see the message, that can be the ones that bring change, which was really encouraging.
Indeed.
So I thank you for being a change agent, for having the heart for that, for these young people, and bringing them here and unpacking that for them. I think that's so incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
So any final words?
Yeah, and I just want to follow our 2 children, black brown children with us.
Yeah.
One is adopted, the other has mixed parents. So, but as I talked to them last night, they both, I talked to them individually, and very profoundly said, they just looked at me and smiled, because they know that I love them dearly, want not protect them, but just to make sure that they're okay.
Yeah.
And they just looked at me and smiled and said, That's what we've been trying to say to everybody for so long. And so their voices are always heard.
Hmm.
And so to hear it, to be, you know, and truly, it's so, out of the mouths of babes, we hear the truth. And so it was just totally moving to be part of that. And they're fine. That's what needs to be said, needs to be told.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. And so it just, yeah, touch me like that as well. And they're the ones they teach me.
Yeah.
And keep me alive. I'm the old dog on the block,
Yeah.
but they're the reason I stay in ministry, I'll be honest with you.
Well, as hard as it was to get Bishop Black there because he's getting a bit forgetful, and he thought I said Thursday when I said Wednesday, and then he came on Wednesday, and you also, you know, were open to that. I just think, like, those moments, those powerful moments, for me, they make all the difference in the world.
They do. That's what it's about right there. Indeed.
Yeah.
And to create a place for that can happen. So
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the work that we do. That's important work, but it's about those connections, relationships, and learnings. So
It's about lives and hearts and minds and spirits touched, right?
you bet. You bet.
That's what it's about. So you have a couple of older white guys here tearing up. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because it's something that's relevant to us and it's important to us, and it becomes a part of our DNA.
Yeah.
And we know as white men we have privilege, and we're clergy and we're probably middle income, right?
That's right.
But our hearts beat for those that, I don't even like to use the word margins, but those who are different, those who are oppressed, those who are suffering injustice, which, being from Minneapolis and the Minneapolis area, from Rochester, you know, I think that was really a catalyst when George Floyd.
Absolutely.
To really awaken some people.
Indeed.
We still need to do more.
A lot more.
And you know, we got woke for a while, and it seems like we kind of went back to sleep, some people. So I think we need to continue that work, and I thank you for that work you do at Peace, because we're siblings, because we're part of the United Church of Christ and part of the same movement. So,
You bet.
Are you going to be at Synod?
I'm not. Jerry's going to be going.
Okay, great.
So he'll be there. I will.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Synod is our big, every 2 years. I think they're going to vote that it's every 3 years.
3 years, I think.
Gathering United Church of Christ folks to kind of bring things to the assembly, to bring things to the Synod, to make statements, right, and to just be together and be partly a decision-making body, but really celebrating
the family.
Yeah, celebrating the family of God and the expression of the United Church of Christ. So, thank you so much for your time and for your paint. I see paint on you.
Appreciate it. You bet, man. Yeah, paint all over me.
Right? Right. Wish I could have been doing that too. Sometimes it's really enjoyable to get away from the regular pace of life. So thank you for joining us, and I think you can go on your website. What's your website?
PeaceChurchUCC.org.
PeaceChurchUCC.org. Go on their website, check them out if you're in Minnesota. Maybe you want to attend their church and be a part of the movement there in Rochester, Minnesota. So thank you.
Thank you.
We wish you well on your 3 months of warm weather.
That's all we got. We're in the middle of it.
I miss snowshoeing. I miss cross-country skiing, but I have a beach, so
it's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. So thank you, Paul.
And thank you for your ministry. We really appreciate what you all do here.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and have a great day. God's blessings to all of you.